Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. So I am very excited about today's video. It is a highly requested one. It is how to chop produce. One of the most common comments that I get on my YouTube channel is, how do you chop vegetables? How did you learn to use a knife? How do you know how to chop different types of produce? What knife do you use? And so this video is going to be all about showing you that. So the reason that I'm in my car right now is actually because I'm at Hy-Vee, which in my town is the best place to buy produce. Do you guys have a place in your town that is like the best for produce? Honestly, here where I live, Hy-Vee is the best. And if you're not familiar with it, I live in the Midwest, and so, you know, it's a Midwest grocery chain similar to, I would imagine, Kroger or somewhere like that. I've actually never been to a Kroger before, but I would imagine it's like that. So I am going to take you into the store with me today. Let's go into the store and see what produce we can find. And then when I get home, I will show you how to chop it up. All right, so they have cantaloupes for 99 cents. We're gonna go ahead and get one of these because this is something that some people find hard to chop up. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So they also have seedless watermelons on sale for $4.99. They're not the local ones yet, but we will grab one of these and I will show you how I chop that up as well. My kids love watermelon in the summer. Let's also grab an avocado. When you pick an avocado, just make sure you try to find one that is dark on the outside and a little bit soft to the touch. Garlic is something else I can show you guys how to chop, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab a head of this. I can't remember if I have any at home right now. I'm not sure that I do, so I'll grab one of these. Okay, so peppers is another thing that I get a lot of questions about. I'm just going to grab one green pepper because they are the cheapest. And obviously you can cut all of the different colors the same way. And then I'll also grab a head of cauliflower and show you how I chop it up as well. I've only got weird looks from like 3 people, so we're doing good. I've been here like 5 minutes. So some recipes call for sectioning citrus fruit, so I'm going to grab an orange and we will go over that as well. Okay, so potatoes and onions. I actually have some onions at home, so I'm not going to get any right now because I have some red onions at home that I will show you. As far as potatoes, I mean, it's not really that complicated, but I do have, I believe, some of those at home as well, so we can use that. I may grab a sweet potato and try that out. Okay, so shallots are something that is similar to onions, but they're smaller. But I'm gonna go ahead and grab a couple of these. These actually have a milder flavor than regular onions do. We're also gonna go ahead and grab some kale. I feel like that's something that sometimes people are intimidated by. And then I do have some celery at home and some romaine lettuce, so we can use the ones that I already have. So I'm not going to buy asparagus because I don't have a use for it right now, but you aren't sure about asparagus, you basically just want to trim the woody ends off. So if you hold it up actually and bend it, it will break right where the woody end is. So then you can go ahead and just discard that or use it for stock, and then the rest of it you can just wash and use for you know, regular roasting or steaming. I am going to also get some leeks. I haven't bought these in quite a long time, but it's basically just like a big green onion. So I'll show you how to process that as well. So carrots are something that is fairly simple, but I'm just gonna go ahead and grab a bunch anyway just to show you. It's super easy. You don't have to buy baby carrots. Obviously you can if you want to. Okay, so we are home now. This is all of the stuff that I picked up. I think the only thing that I didn't, Murphy wants some love. I think the only thing I didn't mention in the video at the store was the corn. I decided to get just a couple of ears of that just to show you guys. So the only other thing I wanted to mention was my knives. So now I will show you that. As far as knives go, you know, there's a lot of different options out there. I'm just gonna kind of show you what I have and what works best for me. My primary chef's knife is this Zwilling J.A. Henkel's chef's knife. This is an 8-inch ice hardened no stain chef knife. You can get these on Amazon. They are an investment, about $150, but I honestly use this pretty much every single day of my life that I cook. I use it, which is pretty much every single day of my life. So I love it. It is totally worth it in my opinion. There is a less expensive Rachel Ray chef's knife that I have that works pretty well. And I'll link that down below also if you need a less expensive option. But if something like this, if you sharpen it and take care of it, it will last you for a really long time. As far as sharpening knives, this is what Adam uses to sharpen my knife with. And I'm sorry, he is not home right now and I cannot tell you how he does it, but I will link this knife sharpener down below if I can find it online. But that's what he uses to sharpen my knives for me. As far as a vegetable peeler, I really like the one from Pampered Chef. And then I also really like the paring knives from Pampered Chef. These are really great to like cut the tops off of strawberries or to cut a kiwi or any other kinds of small fruit. And then obviously a cutting board is something that you'll need if you're going to chop vegetables. I have a butcher block counter in my kitchen, which if you're going to build a house or you have the chance to buy a house with a butcher block countertop, I would totally recommend it. I love it 100%. I would do it all over again. I love my island. But if you don't have a butcher block and you need a cutting board, this one is a Pioneer Woman cutting board. I actually got it from not from Amazon, from Walmart. It was pretty inexpensive. And again, if you take care of it, it will last you a long time. I prefer cutting on wooden cutting boards, especially when I'm cutting vegetables and fruits. Now, if I'm going to cut meat, like raw meat or fish, obviously I would use a plastic cutting board. I do also have some cutting board oil, so let me show you that quickly as well. So this is the cutting board oil that I use, the Real Simple brand, but essentially when I'm done using my cutting board, you can either rinse it off in the sink or wipe it off with a damp cloth. Usually I do rinse it off and dry it really thoroughly. You just want to make sure that a cutting board like this, you don't leave it in the sink to soak in water or it will warp. And then after it's dry, you can just take a dry cloth or a paper towel and rub this oil into the cutting board, and that will help condition it and keep the cutting board in good shape. So let's get started chopping. Okay, so we are getting started by chopping some bell peppers. I obviously have a red bell pepper here. You can see me just using my knife to slice the sides away from the bell pepper. That leaves the stem and the seeds inside, and for me, just really helps me waste less of the pepper. Next, I'm going to hold the pepper with the skin side down on the board and just use my knife in a rocking motion back and forth to cut strips of pepper. For this particular recipe that I was making, I wanted to leave the peppers in strips, but I'll show you in a bit how I would dice that up. I really can't overstate the importance of having a quality, sharp kitchen knife when you do a lot of cooking. I know that, you can just go to Walmart or Target or wherever and buy a $20 kitchen knife, but if you cook a lot and you want to invest in a legitimate chef's knife, it's literally life-changing. I love it. So now I'm just going to show you how I dice these up into small pieces. Typically this would be used like in a soup or on a salad or something like that. So there you go. I just cut it crosswise into small squares. So next is an onion. So this is just how I chop an onion. I know there are lots of different ways, but I take both of the ends off. That way I have a flat surface, and then I cut it in half. And then I'll just use my thumb to peel off the peel, discard that, and then I'm going to chop straight down. You can see me doing that here so that you have strips of onion, and then if you turn it around and cut it the other way, then that is what will give you your fine dice for onions. So obviously if you wanted to have larger chunks of onion, you could just do the one cut and not cut it crossways. Sometimes I do that if I'm doing a pot roast. So that is how I chop an onion. All right, next thing is carrots. Now, this is probably pretty self-explanatory here, but I wanted to really have this video be super comprehensive, so I tried to get as many different fruits and vegetables as I could just to show examples. I have some carrots here. I used a vegetable peeler to peel off the outside. You actually don't have to peel your carrots, especially if you're going to cook them. You can just wash them. But what I like to do is for dicing them up, like I might use these in like a potato soup or something like that, I cut them long ways and then turn them around and cut them into small chunks. So typically for recipes where the carrots are going to be like cooked as part of like maybe you're doing like a soup where you need like carrots and onion and celery, that's how I would cut carrots. If you want to, you can also leave them in strips just by cutting the carrot in half and then turning it over on the flat side. Or if you want to just leave them in rounds, like if you're going to, steam them for a side for dinner, that is how those are done. Okay, so celery is probably another thing that's pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to show it anyway. When I'm making like a chicken salad or a tuna salad, I like to add celery, but I don't like huge chunks of celery. I really like it to be fine. And so what I do is just cut it lengthwise into usually 3 or 4 or as many as I can get strips like that. And then I cut it crosswise so I get the small fine dice of celery. Even if you wanted to just chop them lengthwise and leave them in sticks, you could definitely do that too. But I just find that, especially with celery, since it's so fibrous, that I really like it to be as small as possible in recipes. Okay, so shallots are basically just like onions, right? Except they're smaller, but I just wanted to show this anyway. So same thing for shallots. I just trim off the ends. That way I have a flat surface to set the shallot down on. Use my thumb to just very carefully peel off like just the very outer layer because you don't want to waste any of the shallot. And then these are a little bit more challenging, I think, just because they're smaller, but same principle applies. Cut them one way and then dice them up the other way. And then usually I just run my knife through one last time in like a rocking motion to make sure I get them into fine pieces. All right, so garlic. Garlic is one of those things that I used to buy whole a lot, but now typically I buy garlic paste sometimes. Sometimes I still buy regular garlic. So for this, you just want to separate the cloves and then use your knife to smash the garlic on the cutting board. This makes it super easy for the peel to come off. You can see that it just peels right off, and then you've already done a little bit of the chopping anyway since you've smashed it up. For garlic, you can use like the side of your knife to push it against the board with some salt if you wanted to make like a garlic paste. I typically don't do that. I just try and mince it up as fine as I can. So leeks are something that I actually haven't bought in a really long time, but when I was doing this video, I saw them in the store and I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you guys how to chop those because you never know when you might need to chop up a leek. So as you can see, I trimmed the very ends off. Sometimes those get pretty bruised up, and then cut it in half lengthwise. When you're chopping, you always want to think about how can you cut the food so that you have a flat surface to rest it on while you're chopping the rest of it. This is really the safest way, obviously, because the produce isn't like rocking around on your counter and you're less likely to cut yourself. So I also have a salad spinner. You guys that have watched me for a while know that I love my OXO salad spinner, so I always keep that close by when I'm washing produce. I'll leave a link to that on Amazon if you're interested in purchasing one, but you can see how dirty the insides of the leaves are. I'm just showing you that here. With leeks, they grow up through the soil just like green onions do, so it's really important to chop them first and then soak them. So I usually soak mine in a little bit of cold water and lemon juice, and then you can just spin them dry. So I'm actually going to make a leek and potato soup with those. I'm very excited for it. All right, next is a sweet potato. So I didn't actually show you guys a russet potato because it's the same thing. Sweet potatoes can be hard to cut, and if you don't have a sharp knife, it can actually be dangerous. You can cut yourself pretty easily because they are hard to hard to cut through. So for sweet potatoes, typically I just like to peel them and then trim the ends off very carefully. Slide your knife down through and cut them into like planks like this, and then you have a flat surface where you can cut them lengthwise. You can leave them like that if you wanted to make sweet potato fries, or you can obviously also cut them the other way and then make sweet potato cubes. So what we did with these is actually I roasted them in the oven with a little bit of McCormick grill seasoning and olive oil, and made sweet potato, sort of like roasted sweet potatoes for a side for dinner. They were really good. So I think cauliflower is another one of those things that can intimidate some people. They're not quite sure how to chop it, but for this, basically you just want to cut the cauliflower into quarters like I did here, and then use your knife to just at an angle slice down through the core, and then you can discard or compost that part, and then you're just left with the cauliflower florets. So you can either break these apart with your hand or chop them up with a knife. But I really think in terms of like food and processing produce that like knowledge is power, right? And so some of the reason why people don't cook fresh fruits and vegetables or even buy them is because they're intimidated by how to process them. And you know, you can practice and get easy, you know, it gets easier. And also I think that buying your own produce and washing it and chopping it yourself is obviously so much more economical than buying pre-chopped produce. So next is an avocado. So for this, you just want to be super careful. You can hold the avocado in your hand, run your knife around the pit and sort of twist it off. And then to get the pit out, you can just tap your knife into the pit, twist, and it will come out. Now you can very carefully remove that. You probably should do it with a kitchen towel. Don't do as I do as I say. And then you can just sort of slice your knife through it right in the peel, and then scoop it out with a spoon. Okay, kale is another thing that a lot of people buy pre-bagged and pre-washed, but it's so much cheaper. It's super easy to do it yourself. Basically, you just hold the stem and then use your hand to pull off the leafy part. The stem is super fibrous, and unless you're going to like cook it or saute it a lot, I wouldn't recommend eating it. But essentially, that's all you do. And then I just usually use my hands to kind of ball up the rest of the kale into like a tighter sort of like little package. That way I can run my knife through it. Obviously, if you were going to make kale chips, you might chop these a little bit larger. If you were doing like a sauteed kale in a curry or something like that, you might chop it a little bit smaller. So again, I just put that in my salad spinner, soak it in lemon water, spin it dry, and you're good to go. So in the summer here in Iowa, I love buying fresh corn, and I honestly don't even mind shucking it. To me, it's not that huge of a pain, really. I just like to sort of pull the silk and the husk off in as large of portions as I can, and then you can just sort of use your fingers to pick off a little bit of the silk if there's any of that left on there. So I'm just going to rinse this corn off, and then this is how you would cook it. Like from this state, if you were going to make corn on the cob, you could do it in boiling water or an Instant Pot, but sometimes there are recipes that call for just corn kernels. So basically you just want to hold the corn upright and use your knife to slice down through the kernels. You can do this on like a big plate or a bowl if you want to. It does kind of make a little bit of a mess. Since I have a butcher block counter, it's not as huge of an issue for me, but that is how you cut corn off the cob. I love corn in the summer. It's so good. All right, so next is a cucumber, and this again might be pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, you can cut them into rounds if you're going to use them on a salad or for dipping, or a lot of times in salads, I'll slice the rounds in half just so they're easier to pick up with a fork. Some recipes, you might want to cube the cucumber, so it's the same with the carrot, right? Just cut it in half so you have a flat surface, and then run your knife through the other way. You can make these chunks as big or as small as you want, and for something like this, you might be cubing up cucumber for a pasta salad, or even to put on top of a lettuce salad or something like that. So love cucumber in the summer also. Okay, so green onions are also something that's probably pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to show you guys anyway. So I just trim the root off the end. Now, I've been told that you can regrow these in your kitchen. I've never tried that before, but I might someday. And then I just run my knife through these to chop them up fine. With green onions, typically I leave them whole and rinse them off, but you can also wash them in cold water after you chop them if they're particularly dirty. I think it just depends on what's available at the store that day. So now I have some cilantro, and parsley is obviously the same way, but if you're chopping herbs, I just like to trim the leaves off of the stems as best I can. Obviously, if you have a little bit of stem left in there, it's not going to hurt anything. I ball everything up as tight as I can in sort of that little package and then run my knife through it. So in a rocking motion, just chopping it in different ways until the herbs are finely minced. Lettuce is another thing that I really like to make sure that I chop and wash myself. I mean, there are times when I buy pre-bagged lettuce, but for the most part, I like to chop it on my own. That way I can make sure that it's clean and washed the right way. So for this, I just cut it lengthwise so that the pieces will be smaller when I cut them crosswise. So just run my knife through a couple times like that, turning the lettuce once, and then simply just cut it crosswise the other way. And I'm sitting this in my salad spinner. One thing that I always do is soak my greens in cold lemon water before I rinse them and spin them dry. So you'll see me just squeezing the juice of one lemon over those salad greens here in a little bit. I just fill up the container with really, really cold water. The coldest that you can get it out of the faucet is fine. And then I let that sit for about 10 or 15 minutes before I, again, drain it and spin it. And the lemon juice also helps keep it from going brown in the refrigerator as well. So here I'm just spinning my leaves dry. Then I'll put this in a Ziploc bag, or sometimes I use the Rubbermaid produce keepers, but you can see all that water that's left in the bottom. So there you go. That's how you chop romaine lettuce. Okay, so tomatoes are another thing that is probably pretty self-explanatory, but again, I wanted to show it anyway. So I'm just cutting up this tomato into rings. Obviously, you could leave them like this if you were going to make a caprese, or like I'm doing here, dicing them up. So I do this a lot, obviously, if I'm making like a pico de gallo or a salsa, or chopping up tomatoes for tacos or something like that. But super easy, just slice them and then cut them into cubes. Okay, you guys have to let me know if this is how you cut a mango. It's taken me a while to figure this out, but what I like to do with mango is use a vegetable peeler to peel the skin off of the outside of the mango. And then mangoes have like an oval, sort of like oblong pit, and so you have to be careful when you're cutting the flesh off of that with your knife that you don't sort of run your knife into the pit. You can obviously get hurt and cut yourself, especially since mangoes are so slippery. So I'm just sort of filleting the, is that even the right word? Filleting? Probably not. Taking the mango off of the pit, and then I just slice these into like spears if I'm going to give them to my kids as a snack. Obviously, you could dice them up finer if you're going to make mango salsa or something like that. So the next thing that I'm going to show is cutting up an orange. There's a couple different ways to do this, but how I like to do it is cut both of the ends off and then just run your knife down the side of the peel, taking that off. You want to take as much of the peel off as you can while still leaving most of the flesh. And then you can just cut these crosswise into like little rings, and these are great to use in a salad. So it's not something that I have to do super often, but it's nice to know how to do that. So kiwi the same way. I know I've complained on my channel about cutting kiwi before, but I think I finally found the right way to do it thanks to my friend Tiffany from Simple Wife, Simple Life. She actually sent me a video of her cutting a kiwi, which I thought was super helpful. So just trim the ends off, set it up on its end vertically, and then I use a paring knife because it's a lot easier to handle for a smaller fruit than a large chef's knife would be. But just run your knife down along the flesh and just try to take off the peel without taking off as much of the flesh as you can. And that will leave you with a perfectly peeled kiwi. You can then slice it up. My kids love kiwi fruit, and it's something something I definitely need to buy more of because they love eating it. They just think it's so fun. So once you slice that up, then you can serve it up just like that. All right, so next I'm showing a pineapple. This is basically the same principle. So you're just going to cut off each end so that you have a flat surface to stand the pineapple up on your cutting board. And then just take your knife. You will want to use a chef's knife for this that's super sharp, and cut down and remove the outside skin of the pineapple and any of the like spiky bits that may be on there. And then I always like to flip it over and make sure I get the bottom part as well. And then next you will just basically quarter it vertically into 4 portions. So you can see here I cut it in half and then cut it in half again. And then same with the cauliflower, I just lay the piece down on the cutting board there and run my knife sort of diagonally and take the core out. Now you can save the core and use it for smoothies and stuff if you'd like, but this is the easiest way that I have found to chop up a pineapple. Then once I have the section that's cored, I just slice it vertically into 3 slices and then slice it crosswise to cut it into smaller chunks. So cantaloupe is basically the same principle. You just want to slice off the ends so that you have a flat surface. And then once that's done, you just run your knife sort of vertically down along the cantaloupe while cutting the skin off, but still trying to maintain most of the flesh. Once you get all of the peel off, and sometimes like you can see here, I flipped it over on the other end and repeated that step until all of the skin was off. I just sliced this in half vertically, and then you can kind of see like the seeds in the middle. So just grab like a spoon, like a regular teaspoon or a soup spoon, and use it to scoop the seeds out of the middle of the cantaloupe. That's the easiest way that I've found to do it. And then you're left with just the flesh, and you can cut this up however you want it, in as small a chunks as you want, or as large of wedges if you want also. So sometimes people cut this up into wedges and wrap like prosciutto around it for an appetizer. I was just going to set this in the fridge for my kids to eat during the week. So I'm just cutting it into cubes, and pretty much any cut up fruit like this will keep in the refrigerator for probably 3 to 5 days depending. Strawberries tend to go a little bit quicker, but a tip for that is that if your fruit starts to go south and you're not going to eat it, just go ahead and freeze it, and you can use it in smoothies. So the last thing that I'm going to show you guys is an apple. So this would be like if you wanted to include an apple in a salad or just dice it for any other reason. But I basically take the same approach. So I cut it into quarters and then sort of just put my knife in at an angle to take the core out. You can see me doing that here, and then slice it into slices. You could leave them like that, or then again cut them crosswise to make small chunks. So that's the last thing that I'm going to show you guys for today's video. I know that a lot of people have asked for this video about how to chop produce, and so I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I will answer them down there. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.